Hello, good people of YouTube, Mountbatten here, and today we are talking about what is the best, worst premium ship in the game, and that is the Tier 7 premium British battleship, the Duke of York. Now, the Duke of York is a King George V class battleship, of which we already have the King George V at the Tier 7 slot in the British battleship tech tree. However, there are quite some differences between the King George V and the tech tree and the Duke of York, and we'll dive into those here in a second. But let's talk about the ship itself first. So the Duke of York, by reputation, if you've heard of this ship, which there's a pretty good chance most newer players haven't heard of the Duke of York. The Duke of York carries the reputation of being a straight-up worse King George V. However, after playing her recently and looking back upon my experiences with her, I've determined that that's not entirely accurate. Now, the Duke of York has quite a few, well, interesting moments in its history, if we'll put it like that, in its World of Warships history. Now, first off, this is, of course, a real steel battleship. This ship did exist in real life, was sunk by the Japanese aircraft in World War II, and ironically, its name carries on today in a aircraft carrier. Yeah, so that's kind of ironic if you ask me. Stop typing. Upon editing this, I realized that I am literally an idiot and just told you the history of Prince of Wales and not Duke of York. I seem to have Prince of Wales in the mind quite recently for some reason. Either way, the Duke of York's actual real-life history is that, of course, she was involved with the Battle of the North Cape and the sinking of the Scharnhorst, and that's her claim to fame. And, yeah, she's not Prince of Wales. I actually did order a Prince of Wales model that we'll be putting together for the channel over the summer, probably the first couple weeks of the summer, and I believe that's why I got that mixed up. Anyway, back to the video. But anyway, in World of Warships at least, its history is pretty interesting as well. When introduced way back in the day, the Duke of York originally did not have a heel. The devs were supposedly trying to create some monster child hybrid between a cruiser and a battleship. So she didn't have a heel, but she had absolutely god-tier armor for Tier 7, and she had a 20-second reload time on her main battery guns. She had normal battleship AP, not the short fuse British BB AP, DFAA, hydroacoustic search, and I believe one or two other consumables that were quite unheard of on a battleship, although I cannot for the life of me remember exactly what it was. But she went through several iterations of trying to make this weird battleship/cruiser hybrid concept work. But turns out, when you're a Tier 7 battleship without a heel, no matter what type of armor you have, you just don't push in. And the testers weren't pushing in with Duke of York because you're a battleship with no heel. Even though you have great armor, players aren't going to push in because HE is a thing and fire is a thing. And you can have the best armor in the game, as many battleships do have per their tier. They all still burn equally as fast. Fire doesn't care about armor nor about tier when it's burning. It just gonna burn. So that idea was abandoned, and we got the Duke of York that we have today. So the Duke of York that we have today, it is of course a King George V battleship, and for her armor, she has, well, the same armor as the King George V, which historically in World War II, she was one of the best armored battleships, and in-game, that's kind of reflected here, although she does have a lower than average hit point rate for her tier at 60,500, but that is, of course, kind of compensated with the heal that the Duke of York gets. The Duke of York gets a heal that heals back 60% of pen damage from AP and HE. It does not, however, repair more citadel damage like the improved British battleship heal. So it's not like the Conqueror or the Thunderer, where it can print back a large portion of its health after eating a citadel, or the Minotaur or the Goliath. It is just a Tier 7 ship after all. It doesn't get the Rodney Hill. That's the hill I'm thinking of, the Rodney Hill. Not the Rodney Hill, the Nelson Hill. God, I wish Rodney was in the game. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Anyway, so on top of that, she has actually a pretty darn good bit of guns for being a Tier 7 battleship. She has 10 14-inch guns, so They are, of course, 14 inches, but she gets a lot of them. However, this is where one of the big differences come in between her and the King George V. Her 14-inch guns have a 29.5-second base reload time. The King George V has a 25-second base reload time. This is, of course, at Tier 7. You cannot equip the reload module to get that reload time down. So that's where a lot of people will stop and say, okay, just get the King George V. But there's more to the story than that. Although they have a similar gun caliber and amount, and both shells do the same maximum damage of 10,500 if you manage to pull a citadel off of your target, the Duke of York has a hidden feature that, when she came out, was rarely mentioned. And it's a big pickup for the Duke of York. She has the improved AP pin angles of American cruisers on 14-inch battleship guns. Let that sink in for a second. Now, keep in mind, she does have the British BB AP, which means that she is fantastic for dealing with cruisers. The AP arms in roughly half the amount of time of normal battleship AP, so you get less overpins on cruisers. Plus, they're 14-inch guns. So, they aren't large guns that will overpin just because of their caliber. They have a shorter fuse time, so this ship dunks on cruisers. And even against other battleships too. Sure, you may not citadel them, but you'll be pinning them at much better angles than King George V. And keep in mind too, she still does have that British BBHE, with a 41% chance of starting a fire per shell with 10 guns. Granted, it is a 29.5-second reload time, but of course with Adrenaline Rush and the way that British BBs take damage, your reload will be lower. Of course your health will be too, but you of course will be a nice little flamethrower. Now, she does have pretty good AA, well, used to have pretty good AA, again, Commander Rework, and then, CV Rework, then Commander Rework kind of threw a monkey wrench into that. She does have good concealment too. Without a commander on, she has a 14.1 kilometer detection range. If you throw a commander on there with concealment expert, that of course will get down even lower. So, for example, if I throw my Thunderer commander on here, she now has a 12.7 kilometer detection range, which is quite good, especially for Tier 7. That's the other thing too, she does sit at Tier 7, which means that, unlike Tier 8 ships, she will be top tier more often than not. And when she is top tier, boy, it's a party, boys. Because you have those 14-inch guns with that improved AP pin angle, that short fuse British BB AP, and you can absolutely wreck cruisers. And back in the day, you can even go back and watch some of my older streams and older videos from back then. People would ask me to take out the Duke of York, and I would always be surprised about how well I did in Duke of York. And I didn't really know about the improved AP pin. I always heard about it, but I always just dismissed it as that was probably one version of it. And I would go read reviews, watch other videos about the Duke of York, and it was rarely mentioned. But I did some digging recently, a couple of weeks ago, and sure enough, it sure has got him. And I've been playing her, testing her out, see how she does in this current meta, and surprisingly enough, she works pretty well. Now, of course, Deadeye is very much in play because of her concealment range and her main battery gun range of 18.1 kilometers. So you do have 6 kilometers there to play with, which at Tier 7 is pretty decent. But of course, Deadeye is leaving. But without Deadeye 2, the guns are still fairly accurate for Tier 7. And again, you've got that great British BBHE to fall back on too. So when you do get up tier to Tier 9, now, of course, your bow and stern armor do suffer there because you only have a 26mm bow and stern. So you're safe from 15-inch, but you're not safe from 16-inch. And there's a lot of 16-inch at higher tiers, so you got to angle and try to bait them into shooting your armor belt, and you'll be okay there. Not to mention, too, that the ship is surprisingly maneuverable with a maximum speed of 29.4 knots with the speed flag, so you can go almost 30 knots at Tier 7. It does have a fairly longer rudder shift time at 17.5 seconds, but you're still pretty quick for a Tier 7 battleship with the speed flag at least. And of course, we're getting the glorious swift and silent skill here in 10.4. And this is a joke, by the way. It's a joke. I'm not seriously mentioning taking that skill because it's going to be pretty useless unless you just want to get your Georgia up to over 40 knots for the memes. But anyway, so with playing the Duke of York recently, she has been quite the darn good battleship. What's another big pickup for her is that she is a coal ship. You can get this ship for 101,000 coal. Now, here's the thing. I would definitely recommend you get the higher tier coal ships before you get the Duke of York. But since the Duke of York isn't a higher tier coal ship, and she carries a reputation for being a quote-unquote bad premium ship, and because you don't see her, well, at all in the game, really, she's probably not going to be removed anytime soon. So I would recommend getting the higher tier ships first, then coming back down and grabbing the Duke of York. Probably should be one of the first mid-tier coal ships you should get. If you don't want to save up the coal, she is available from the shop for $40. Is a bit high to be buying a digital item for that much, especially a tier 7 battleship. Am I saying she's worth $40? I mean, it's a coal ship, and in this game, anytime you can get a premium ship for a free alternative, I would highly, 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 highly recommend you do that rather than just buying the ship for cash. She does have hydroacoustic search too, I forgot to mention that, which is a bit weird because the ship doesn't really have any motivation to push with. It doesn't have any type of dispersion gimmicks. Her secondaries are barely there. And she doesn't have fantastic armor for close range brawling or anything, but she's got Hydro, so if you're being shadowed by a DD, you can keep that running and avoid eating the torpedoes, so that's pretty nice. But all in all, a ship that's gone from being one that I didn't even take a second look at to, after playing her a decent bit in the past couple of weeks, I've come to quite enjoy. And I already did like the King George V class battleship, and I'm not saying Duke of York's better than the King George V. I'm just saying that it's a different King George V. It's more AP-centric. It's more of a mid-range battleship where the King George V you kind of keep at longer range and you spam HE. So I'm not a fan of HE spam, and the Duke of York has that improved AP pin angle, so I'm enjoying her a lot more because of that for one main reason. But the ship can, of course, HE spam if you need it to, which you will need to when you get up tiered to those higher tiers. Now, of course, 10 14-inch shells to the broadside of a tier 9 battleship, that's going to hurt that tier 9 battleship pretty good. But because of the short fuse AP, you probably won't be citadeling it unless you're really close, which you can do definitely with the armor if you angle it correctly and they go for your belt and not for your bow armor. But at higher tier, I mean, let's be honest, you're going to be sitting toward the back, throwing HE most of the time in the Duke of York. And that is where the King George V does come out ahead because of its 25-second reload time on its guns. But a ship that I just wanted to give some due credit to for not being a terrible ship and it having a reputation for being a terrible ship. Now, am I saying this is like the jewel of the Tier 7 premium ships? No, we have a lot of really good Tier 7 premium ships like the Nelson, the Scharnhorst, so forth and so on. But this is a ship that definitely deserves some love, and if you get a chance to pick it up either for coal or if you're feeling like you can splurge a bit and you want to buy a Tier 7 premium battleship, Duke of York is a pretty solid choice, in my opinion at least, even in the current meta. And again, like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, Tier 6, Tier 7, really the golden tiers right now, more toward Tier 7, but this is a ship that, again, can hang in at Tier 9 games because of that British BB HE. Now, will you be leading top of the leaderboard in terms of damage? Probably so, actually, with that British BB HE, but in Tier 9 games, of course, you just do what you gotta do to remain relevant and try to help out your team as much as you can in those Tier 9 games. Plus, you have that great concealment to where you can pretty much choose when you want to leave the action. I mean, 12.7 kilometer concealment on a Tier 7 BB, that's better than a lot of Tier 9 and 10 battleships detection ranges, except for, of course, like the Conqueror and the Thunderer. So you definitely have that going for you there. But anyway, guys, just wanted to give a little bit of love and credit to the Duke of York, which has been a fantastic ship for me recently again. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, tell me what you think about the Duke of York in the comment section down below, and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way now to 25,000 subs, just past 24,600 a few days ago, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. And again, I am planning on doing a very big giveaway once we get to 25,000, so make sure you guys keep checking in for that. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.